So mission and vision, or vision, how did we combine it? Vision.
Vision and mission.
Yeah. Yeah, whatever it is. We have been talking a lot about mission and vision. And I mean, we help clients with that all the time too.
Yeah.
We've kind of revisited ours recently, and it was super encouraging. But one of the things I wanted to talk to, because I know we've already touched base on a mission and a vision and why they're important in values, but
Yeah.
when should a company like revisit them? I mean, like, hey, is this still aligning with who we are and where we want to go?
It's a good question. I would say I've got two answers for it. One is, I mean, I think you should look at it every year. I think it can change. I think people can change, leaders can change. And so you still have to make sure your mission is motivating, where you're going is motivating. And most of the time, team dynamics change every year because you've brought in new people, you've promoted people, people have transitioned to whatever. And so it's super important to make sure that, like kind of your core group of people that lead your company resonate with your mission and where you're going. So honestly, I think it's a great exercise going into like a year. Like, so last week, and I mentioned this on a couple of videos recently, that we did a yearly planning for 2022. And so we spent a couple of days, knocked everything out of our schedules and just focused on, hey, what do we want to do next year? What are some of our plans, our goals? How are we going to get there? All that kind of stuff. And it was super great to like touch on our mission and our vision and some of our kind of core values or kind of key characteristics going into next year, and revamping them a little bit, tweaking them a little bit. It's not like we, started with a blank sheet by any means, but we kind of tweaked a little bit. So I would suggest people look at it every year for those reasons. Or if you're growing really fast, you're generally reinventing yourself every 3 to 6 months, depending on how fast you're growing. Excuse me. And so you want to make sure you're reevaluating where you're going, what you're doing. It's specifically important, in my opinion, for startups, because most of the time startups start with some idea and they work to prove that idea. But then if they're smart, they listen to the market and they listen to customers and listen to what customers are buying. And that oftentimes doesn't perfectly align with what that entrepreneur or that startup started pushing forward on day one. And so like working towards like, what is our mission now? What's our vision now? Where are we going now? Can move and change. And that target starts to move and change as you're going. And so honestly, like I would say it should be something that you're using to like hire people and onboard people and invite people into. And if you're growing fast, that happens regularly, which means you need to make sure you're kind of updating that really regularly. A couple of thoughts on that. Mission and vision is interesting because of the fact that lots of times people write their mission statements like very high level. In my opinion, they look like they're written by lawyers, like there's a little bit of legalese kind of in it, and they're not very super motivating or specific. And so it kind of just gives us like overarching, we want to be the best we can be somewhere out there kind of thing. And you're kind of going, well, what is that? Like, what is that something that's motivating for people to be invited into or not? And I would say in the old day, I don't know when you'd want to phrase that. The old day, people were a lot more motivated by like, I just plug in, I get a job or I get a paycheck, I do my stuff and I go home. And I would say we have left that. That's gone.
Yeah.
And it's not transitioning out. It's not like, well, someday it'll change. You're not seeing it in the horizon. It's gone. And people are now motivated by, well, what am I helping push forward? Yeah, sure. I need a paycheck. I need to be paid well. I need to have money to spend, all those types of things. And that makes total sense because you should pay people for what they're worth, for their value and that kind of thing. But you also have to focus on, well, what are you building and how is that motivating people? And are they excited about it? And is that getting them out of bed every morning? And is that helping them show up as their best? And so that's super important. So I think honestly, like revamping your mission on a regular basis to make sure it resonates is super important. And that's different for different stages of companies. So that was like 5 minutes of rambling. I have no idea if any of it made sense. I hope it did.
No, it did.
Thoughts?
It really did. And one of the things that I pulled out and that has kind of stuck with me, as you were talking about, is like sometimes people leave things vague because they're afraid about pigeonholing themselves into something. And it's like, oh, then I have to do it this way. It's not good to have a vague mission statement. Our mission statement covers a lot, but it's really specific. And I think that is super important because if you leave it vague, people don't understand what to do. And your mission statement needs to be something that people can act on.
Yeah. No, totally. It needs to be something that acts as, I did a workshop for a client. We helped them come up with their mission statement and recently, and really what we focused on is like having your mission statement be your filter of how you make decisions. If your mission statement doesn't have like any sort of aspiration or inspiration to it, then likely it's going to be really hard to be someone that's really reaching for like a growth. I'm going to call it a growth goal, like way out in the future, because of the fact that it's like, no, we're good with the status quo. We kind of are settlers, like we're great with this and we're just going to optimize and make this better. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. If you're listening, like that's great. That can be how you're wired and that's what you're passionate about and content with. And that's awesome. But then there's some other crazy people out there, myself being included on that are having that have to work really hard to be content and always want to go like get something that's way down I feel like I'm like high-fiving somebody off the screen. There's no one over here. That's just,
you should do this side of the screen. And
okay, sorry, yeah, there you go.
There we go. I'm not doing it right. Anyways,
talking with your hands on Zoom is just comical. So there's no one here. I'm engaging with the screen. I'm looking at Amanda. I'm not looking back at myself. So that's good. Anyway, I have no idea what I was talking about.
Well, I have one last question.
Long, like reaching out for vision is important, and having a mission statement that backs that up from an inspiration aspiration standpoint is also important.
It just goes right into my next question. How does your vision statement complement your mission statement?
That's a good question. I have been working really hard on trying to figure out how you can incorporate both of them into one statement. And one of the reasons why is because of the fact that I've worked at several jobs in the past, and I couldn't tell you now, nor could I tell you when I worked there, what their mission statements were, what the vision statements were, what the core values were, because there was sometimes like 12 core values, and there was something like, I was great with them and they resonated when I read them in the handbook or whatever, but I'm not memorizing them. They could be, I think in one of the companies, it was like painted on the wall and I still didn't remember it. And so then like, how do you like incorporate both of them together to have like a mission, which generally is kind of like a more of a current present day to maybe 3 to 5 years out, as well as a vision that is like longer term for what you're wanting to build or the impact you're wanting to have. And I think it's important to try to figure out how to incorporate them both into one. It can be really challenging and it can take a while, but it's worth generally like kind of beating your head against the wall a little bit to figure it out, because I think it's super motivating when you do. So
I love that. Cool.
Yeah.
This has been a fun conversation. Thanks for
absolutely. I love it.